gave God credit for this mask that you put on the sick people's face. No, we never did that. We just think doctors came up with this. They originated that. When somebody had a contagious disease, they said, put this mask on you. And we never thought that God did that many hundreds of thousands of years before the medical system had ever figured that out. Now, the only difference is, Satan many times, he's not a creator, he's a copycat. Many times he will take the principles of God and pervert it. God said, put the mask on the sick person. The medical system said, put the mask on the healthy person. Now, can you see how the fault in that? Would it be more practical to cover the sick person instead of covering the healthy person? Which one would you do?
Sick person.
You would cover the sick person. That way that everybody else would be free from contamination. But not so with the medical system. The work of the true medical missionary is largely a spiritual work. It includes prayer and the laying on of hands. He therefore should be as sacredly set apart for his work as a minister of the gospel. That's another problem we have, is that we see doctors as doctors, we see preachers as preachers. But God don't see them like that. God sees the doctor and the preacher, the preacher and the doctor. He sees a combination of both. And so those who are selected to act the part as missionary physicians are to be set apart as such. In other words, if a man is a medical missionary physician, he should be set aside and ordained as a man of, as a minister of the gospel. Why did God want the ministers to be ordained and set aside? This will strengthen them against the temptation to withdraw from the sanitarian work to engage in private practice. What is God talking about? Talk to the Holy Spirit again. There will be a temptation that will arrive that the medical missionary physicians would be in such demand that they would get their eyes off the gospel and go to make money. They would go into private practice and leave the medical missionary work alone. So God thought if we would ordain them as we ordain ministers of the gospel, this would prevent them from withdrawing from the sanitarian work to engage in private practice. Well, that's a good idea, but in reality, most of our physicians did go into private practice. They have abandoned the sanitarian work. They did that for filthy lucre. And no one is telling them, because most of the support that we get is from doctors and nurses. Most of the money that come into the treasury come in through the medical system. And I can tell you, you're not going to tell a doctor that is your main supporter that you have abandoned God's word and you're seeking filthy lucre, because you're scared you're going to refuse to support your church or your ministry. Then God went ahead and said, no selfish motive should be allowed to draw the workers from his post of duty. Okay, so what was the selfish motive? To make money for themselves, so that they can prosper and leave God's word languishing. This is a reproof that God has sent to his church, but his church has failed to accept this. And if the medical missionaries would have remained faithful to the gospel ministry and would operate as a doctor and a preacher, then we could educate the people on proper hygiene, lifestyle, and diet. We would receive statements like this from you. Eating salt raises the amount of sodium in your bloodstream, wrecks the delicate balance, reduces the ability of your kidneys to remove water. The result is a high blood pressure due to extra fluid, extra strain on the delicate blood vessels, leading to kidney problems. Doctors would be talking like this. Instead of telling you just take a drug, he was saying you need to cut back on that salt and all that fatty foods and all that grease and high protein food. It is offsetting the delicate balance of your body and causing an elevation of your blood pressure. Can salt cause blood pressure? He would educate the people. How does salt increase blood pressure? When you eat too much salt, which contains sodium, your body holds extra water to wash the salt from the body. Now it's beginning to make sense. So if I eat a lot of salt, the body will trap fluid in the body so that it can try to flush out that extra salt. Then you suffer from edema. Well, why do you suffer from edema? Edema because too much salt or sodium in the blood. What do doctors give you to wash out the sodium? Too much sodium, give you a diuretic. What do God cause to happen? He make you urinate a lot to reduce the amount of sodium. And so this may cause blood pressure to rise. The added water puts stress on the heart and blood vessels. So this edema can cause congestion of the heart failure. It can cause kidney failure. It can do all these things. Now, this don't happen instantaneously. This is a progressive, degenerative process. Over repeated violations, your kidney will malfunction. Your heart will become congested. You will find yourself exhausted with a little exertion that you don't know where it came from. You used to could walk, now you're tired in a few steps. Where is this coming from? By continual disobedience is where it's coming from. But there are many wonderful foods that can help bring down your blood pressure. And God has given these things that it may serve to help restore the body. Leafy green vegetables are high in potassium. Potassium helps your kidney get rid of the sodium through what? The urination process. Berries, especially blueberries, are rich in natural components called flavonols. Beets and yogurt and oatmeal and bananas and omega-3 and seeds and all of these things all can help lower your blood pressure. There are at least 10 lifestyle changes you need to make to hasten the lowering of your blood pressure. First thing you need to do is reduce those extra pounds that you have gained. And that's because we've been eating foods that are so high in calories, and we're gaining weight. We are not exercising the way we used to. We need to exercise regularly. We need to eat a healthy diet. We need to reduce our sodium in our diet. We need to eliminate coffee and sodium and all type of junk food out of our diet. There are many things we should not eat if you have high blood pressure, especially a lot of your processed food that are saturated with sodium. Frozen foods is another dangerous one. Candy and soda pops and pastries, all of these things can lay the foundation of your problem, and all these things can bring about high blood pressure, and it can have an extra effect on your heart and your health. Diet and exercise, we should always practice that controlled hypertension, because by exercising our body, we exercise our organs, and we keep them in tone. If you notice pain radiant in your chest, you may think it's indigestion. Or you may think, I just sprained myself. But these may be something called angina pains. Angina pains is nothing but many little small heart attacks. You get to angina pains before you end up with a really big one, and that is a heart attack. Your body's letting you know that I'm about to have a heart attack. And the book of Ezekiel, the 24th chapter, one of God's most faithful prophets had an experience with a stroke. Also the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, behold, I take away from thee the desires of thine eyes with a stroke. Yet neither shalt thou mourn nor weep, neither shalt thy tears run down. Forbear to cry, make no mourning for the dead. Bind the tie of thine head upon thee, and put on thy shoes upon thy feet, and cover not thy lips. Eat not the bread of men. Why did God tell him to do that? And why did God permit this man's wife to die of a stroke? Because God would use that as a proverb against Israel. But he got to go through all of this for God to get a message. And he did. She died of a stroke. Not only her, but there have been many wonderful people in this great Advent movement that have suffered a stroke, a heart attack. I'm going to go through a few. Ellen G. White. In March 1858 in Lubbock Grove, Ohio, while Mrs. White was in vision, many scenes of the great controversy between Christ and Satan flashed before her. Now keep in mind, when she wrote the book Great Controversy, the devil was angry at her. Because that book was about to expose him as a great deceiver, like nothing else had done. That whole book, the many pages, exposed the personality of the devil, and the devil would muster everything he could to stop her. And you may say, well, why did God protect her? Well, why didn't God protect Job? See, we don't deal things like that. We always say, well, you know, if she was God's servant, why didn't God protect her? And then I said, what about Job? Did not God permit permit the devil to vex Job? Yes. But he said you can't take his soul. And that's the way it was with her. Now let's see what happened, what Satan was able to do with her. The great converse between Christ and Satan flashed before her. She was bidden to write them out. On the way home, she and her husband laid plans for writing out the vision and publishing that part concerning the great controversy. So they are strategizing how to publish this book that would expose Satan. And while she was conversing, her tongue seemed to get larger and numb. She could not utter a word. A strange sensation struck her heart. She felt what? A slight heart attack. And over her head began to pound. And down her right side, this was the third stroke that paralyzed, which she suffered. And she fully expected to lay down her life at that time. The brethren prayed for her, and prickling sensations came into her legs until she used them a little. And eventually God recovered her from that stroke and that heart attack. Satan could not take her soul. And it wasn't finished. Another very powerful brother named A.T. Jones. A.T. Jones was called to fight against this Sunday movement, the Sunday Blair Law. He was the most knowledgeable man dealing with the Constitution of the United States and church and state relationship. He was the man that wrote the message, him and Ella Wagner, on 1888 message of righteousness by faith, which we have perverted and has no concept of what is righteous by faith. Today, most people don't even understand what that message was. They say, well, righteousness by faith is simply just having faith in Christ's righteousness. It was much more deeper than that. And everybody that advocate righteousness by faith think they're preaching the message because they say that it's about having faith in God. No, it was much deeper. Do you know that the brothers that fought A.T. Jones, Ella Butler, Uriah Smith, Ella Daniel, all these brothers fought against this message and rejected this message? They all wrote books on righteousness by faith. Every one of them wrote a book on righteousness by faith way before A.T. Jones now. But when A.T. Jones and Wagner presented this message, they rejected that message because it didn't come through the channels by which they thought it should come. They thought that God would use them to bring this message. These was unlearned men, and they said, we will not accept it. And that message had something else that irritated them. The message by righteousness by faith was that God is able to run his church from heaven. He don't need an earthly organization to run his church. That God is captain with his people. He didn't need a General Conference president. And when they brought out that we was not to have a General Conference president, that God could run his church, and that when we turned to a General Conference president, we did the same thing that Israel did when they told Samuel that we want a king to rule us. and no longer God, but let us have a king like the other nations. We did the same thing in 1888. And God would send a message that we would reject that system of organization, that we would have a congregation of brothers that would oversee the church, and God would direct them. And they rejected that because they wanted a man to lead them as Israel did in the wilderness. This brother wrote many beautiful things on the righteousness of Christ. But, once again, Jones returned to Battle Creek to rest and treatments, and was making satisfactory progress until in the early May, he suffered a stroke that caused his death a few days later. This brother was put out of the church. He was put out of the organization because he refused to yield to the brothers in control. And what he did, he went to Washington, D.C., Maryland. He joined a black organization, Seventh-day Adventist church called the People's Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I have the original document. I'm one of the few people who have the original document on whatever happened to A.T. Jones. He joined that church. And when he tried to join that church, they told him that we want you to come here and teach us the three angels message. He told them, if I join this church, the conference is going to come down on y'all. They're going to bear down on y'all, and they're going to put y'all out. And they said, we don't care. We want the message. He joined that church, and that's exactly what they did. They put that church out of the organization. They went to them and said, don't you know A.T. Jones is a white man? Why is you letting him join your church? And he's white.
So who did that?
The conference. I have the document. I have the document.
So he didn't apostatize?
No, he didn't, never.
That's what they saying.
I'm so glad you brought that out. A.T. Jones never apostatized. He simply stood for truth. He left them and joined the black Seventh-day Adventist organization that was in the conference called the People's Seventh-day Adventist Church. I have the document. And they threatened them that if they didn't put A.T. Jones out, that they were going to put them out of the conference. They refused to do it. They put them out of the conference. And A.T. Jones stayed there until he got sick. He left Maryland, went back to Battle Creek, and he died there. And do you know when he died that the Seventh-day Adventist organization did not give him a funeral? That it took a first-day church, a Baptist church minister, knew A.T. Jones, and he let him have his funeral in his church. That hatred went beyond his living until he's dead, and there's still no Adventist church would have his funeral. And I have all that document. Another dear brother named Ella Andrews. Andrews elected the third president of the General Conference until May 1869, after which he became the editor of the Review and Herald. In 1872, his wife, Angeline, died from a stroke. So his wife died from a stroke. Ella Butler, this was one of the brothers that fought against the 1888 message. Powerful brother. He was an administrator and author, originally from Vermont. Butler's parents was closely involved in the beginning of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. George Butler, during his youth, expressed leaning toward infidelity. In 1853, his family moved to Iowa, where he was converted at age 22 and baptized by J.N. Andrews. He then settled on a farm and taught school during the winter months. He married Sister Lockwood. After their marriage, they settled near Iowa, where George resumed teaching. Soon after the 1888 conference session, that is the Righteous by Faith message came in 18. Soon after that, Butler moved to Florida and purchased a rural farm which they raised citrus fruits. The following year, his wife suffered a debilitating stroke. It was during these years of solitude that Butler repented of the wrong course he had followed in events surrounding 1888. So he recognized that he was wrong in rejecting the message raised by faith, and he repented of it. And then his wife died soon after that of a stroke. After the 1888 general concert, brothers moved to Florida, and same when his wife died of a stroke. James White, Ellen White's husband, moved to Battle Creek, and soon the brethren laid heavy responsibility on him, and to the point it burdened him down so much, he took on too much responsibility. White sustained a second stroke, and another in the spring of 1872. As a result, he and his wife spent the summer in Colorado and the winter in California, where he convalesced. Thus, they made their first visit to the land which was later to become a stronghold of Adventism. Returning to Battle Creek in the spring of 1873, James White had a fourth stroke that paralyzed him, and he died soon after that. Uriah Smith, another brother that fought against the 1888 message, died of a stroke at 70 years old while walking to the Revere and Herald publishing house. Another one that you may know, Wycliffe. Wycliffe had already in 1382 suffered a paralyzed stroke. In December 1384, he had a profound stroke and died that New Year. Now, and I only just picked out a few, but I was amazed to find out that a lot of the leaders died of a stroke and high blood pressure. It is the #1 killer, even among Adventists. But now, what is a stroke? It's a traffic jam. Now, can you imagine being in something like this? That's a traffic jam. And I wanted to put this in so you can get an illustration of what is a stroke. And this is the stroke right here.
A highway infamous for gridlock, but nothing ever like this. Air, it looks almost beautiful, but don't tell that to anyone caught up in this nightmare who went on social media to vent their frustration. Are you sure that's traffic? Maybe they decorated the 405 with Christmas lights. And this, it's called the 405 for a reason. It takes you 405 hours to get anywhere. Headlines describe the traffic horror. World's worst traffic jam, and epic jam terrorizes LA. This dude posted videos stopping and starting, stopping and starting. It went on forever. Motorists tried their best to stay calm and pass the time. For one young lady singing a Christmas song.
Now, so all that stress, can you imagine the stress they're going through in this traffic jam? Well, believe it or not, that's what's happening to your body when you having a traffic jam with your blood. And we'll see that. A stroke can have a profound effect on your body, your whole circulatory system. As your blood circulates through your whole body, if anything obstructs that flow of blood, it's going to cause pressure to rise, whether it's in your brain, your kidneys, or your legs. This peripheral pressure can build up so great that it can cause the blood vessels to budge or to burst. Your blood should flow freely through without any obstruction. But anything that have invaded the bloodstream that can cause blood vessels to stick or to clog up together can eventually block little tiny blood vessels. This can cause major problems in the body. Your blood should move freely without any obstruction. But because of the food that we eat, especially full of fat, and protein. Much of this fat can stick to our blood and cause them to clump up, as we see right here, a clot beginning to build up with blood and fat and protein. And as it calcified, it developed into a lump. As it continued to build up over a possession of time, sometimes these little lumps can break off and travel. Under a lot of pressure, they can cause major problem in the brain, where you can suffer an aneurysm, stroke. Anytime the blood has been deprived from certain parts of the cells, that cell will die. Once again, we see this traffic moving, but something can cause a traffic jam. Many of you have been in a wreck, where all of a sudden, one collision can cause a bag of traffic. That's what's happening to your body. When you eat too much fat, too much grease, poor circulation, not drinking enough water. Water is so important because it keeps your blood fluid and able to move. All these things are so important. And if we would view our body the same way we view any type of traffic jam, then we have a better idea what's going on inside of us. Now let's look into the arteries so we can see what's happening in our arteries. This is a normal artery where we eat reduced amount of fat. One of the big problems you eat fat, the fat will not get in the arteries, it will get in the membrane around the arteries. And as it build up and build up, it can cause your arteries to close in. Now they can check your arteries, and your arteries can be clean. They don't see any fat deposits. But do they check the inner membrane of the artery and see that your arteries are slowly being squeezed off? That's going to cause a backup depression in other places. So just remember, your arteries may not have no fat in it, but they should check to see, is it inner membrane? Is building fat? And we take a look at plaque. This is looking inside of the body. There we can see the traffic.
In healthy coronary arteries, the blood flows without obstruction. In diseased coronary arteries, a fatty substance called plaque forms in the artery walls, and as the disease advances, may bulge out into the path of the onrushing blood, blocking the oxygen and nutrients the heart desperately needs, and from time to time, causing symptoms like chest pains and shortness of breath. But heart attacks result more often from plaque that does not protrude into the artery itself, but remains hidden in the artery wall.
One of the scariest things about coronary artery disease is that it can remain silent for so long. You can have plaque buildup in the coronary that isn't causing you any problem, doesn't cause you any symptoms, doesn't even cause a positive stress test, but suddenly ruptures. It ruptures, it causes a blood clot to form, the rest of the coronary artery, the rest of the pipe suddenly gets blocked, and a heart attack occurs. And that's really the most common cause of heart attack. This is what kills people, often in the prime of their lives.
All plaque is dangerous. So unstable, on the verge of rupture. Scientists are today trying to determine how to identify the unstable plaque, while doctors try and help patients minimize their risks.
What takes place is that once a rupture has taken place, it won't be a complete blockage, but your body recognizes that a rupture has taken place. Blood cells will come in and will build around it to try to seal off the rupture, called platelets. Your platelets are certain blood cells that try to keep you from bleeding. You cut yourself and you bleed. What stops you from bleeding is your platelets. That's your clotting factor. When you have an artery that bursts inside of you, those platelets will come in and try to seal it off. And as it build up and build up and build up and seal it off, it brings about a complete blockage. Even though it's trying to help you, because the pressure behind it is started pushing out more platelets will come in and try to keep it from bleeding until it fill off the whole artery. Let's look once again as we look at a stroke.
Occurs when there is an interruption in the blood supply to the brain. When a stroke occurs, some brains are temporarily starved of oxygen, causing them to swell and stop working properly. This is why the effects of stroke are worse at the beginning. After a few days, when the swelling starts to go down, some cells recover, but others may not.
Now you hear what he said. Once a rupture has taken place in the brain, the swelling takes place. That swelling is the most dangerous aspect of brain cancer and a stroke. Your brain is in a trapped cylinder. It do not have the space for swelling. And so if it swell, it's going to bring some really damaging effect. So after a few days, what they have to do is to put you in an induced coma, give you some prednisone and other drugs to keep the brain from swelling. This slows down any deterioration of the brain cells. And after a few days, once the inflammation subsides and the swelling go down, they will bring you out of the coma. That is necessary. And so if someone out there, if a loved one is facing a stroke, let the medical system do what they're supposed to do. Because this is the only chance they got. They have to give an induced coma. Slow down any further deterioration of brain cells. If you don't do that, that person will end up being comatose, or that person is going to be nothing but a vegetable.
Even then, other parts of the brain can be encouraged to take over. Ischemic stroke. This happens when a clot blocks an artery that carries blood to the brain. It may be caused by a blood clot, which is formed in the main artery to the brain, a blockage caused by a blood clot, air bubble or fatty lump forms in a blood vessel somewhere in the body and is carried in the bloodstream to the brain.
Now what you see here, over here you can see the blockage. There's no blood getting through because of the blockage. It's a traffic jam. Over here to my left, those organs and vessels are deprived of oxygen. They're going to die. And that's why it's so crucial that we get some help quick.
Blockage in the tiny blood vessels in the brain. Hemorrhagic stroke. This happens when there is a rupture of a blood vessel in the brain. It may be caused by a blood vessel which bursts inside the brain, a blood vessel which bursts on the surface of the brain and bleeds into the area between the brain and...
Okay. Hemorrhagic stroke is where pressure builds up like an aneurysm. It just builds up and builds up like a balloon, then all of a sudden, it bursts. If that happens, the brain is bleeding, and that is a very dangerous stroke. That is the most common stroke. In that case, you want to get help quick. The only thing you can do in a case like that, until you get help, is to give a hot foot bath and a cold compress to the brain and give them some cayenne pepper to emergency help get there.
Right.
Oh.
Is there a way, like if you get it in time? I think I agree with someone that if you, when you see the signs, first signs of it, if you, something that you can do right away, they can stop it.
Yeah, that's, what you're saying is that there are things you can do to prevent it. There are many things you can do, and I'm gonna go through some of the treatments you can do to prevent it. This is where you know you're a candidate for a stroke. But once that blood vessel bursts, it's too late. It's too late. But there are many things we can do as preventive recovery. We can recover from a stroke. But keep in mind, and this is where people are making so big mistakes. Once it happens, once that blood vessel breaks, then you're in trouble unless you get quick emergency care. In the meantime, you can reduce the damage by putting an ice pack on the head, hot foot bath. That's me channeling that blood away from the brain and allow that pressure to subside some.
You know what, my sister, cause she was in there too long, the blood had gelled in her hand. When they opened it up, it was gelled in her hand.
Right. And anytime that blood is like that, they'll drill a hole in your skull and put a shunt in it, and so that they can let that pressure out, get it out of there. They got to get that out, clean that out.
Important to understand that no two people are affected by stroke in the same way. Some people have only mild effects which improve in a short time. Others may suffer more serious and long-term effects. The effect of a stroke on a person depends on which part of the brain has been affected and how much damage has been caused. The brain has two sides, hemispheres. The messages, nerve signals, cross over at the base of the brain.
Now, what is the reason for all these problems with our circulatory system? And we'll see here.
Heart attacks, certain cancers, osteoporosis, diabetes, the major diseases of our society may be caused in part by what we eat. One of the physicians who helped me to understand why is Dr. Michael Clapper.
I first woke up, so to speak, when I was working on the anesthesia service, learning how to put people to sleep. And I was seeing my patients for the next day's surgery, for coronary artery bypass surgery, in order to bypass clogged arteries in their heart. Because it was late at night, I drew the man's blood test, and when I took the blood to the laboratory and had it processed, I couldn't believe my eyes. Now, normally, this liquid layer floating on top of the blood clot is quite transparent. It's yellow, but quite clear. You can see right through it. The blood in this patient's tube, however, was anything but clear. The serum floating on his clot was thick and greasy white. It looked like glue. In fact, it stuck to the sides of the blood tube when I shook the tube. I went back to the patient. I said, Mr. Phillips, did you eat before you came to the hospital tonight? He said, yes. I said, what did you have? He said, I had a cheeseburger and a milkshake. And when he said that, I realized that what I was looking at in his tube was all the fat in the beef burger, all the butter fat in the cheese, and the butter fat in the ice cream and in the milkshake. And all this fat had oozed out into his blood and actually turned his blood fatty. The next morning, we took Mr. Phillips to the operating room, and I put him to sleep, and the surgeon opened up his chest. And from these arteries, you began pulling out yellow, greasy deposits of fatty material called atherosclerosis.
This is a beautiful example of what atherosclerosis looks like. There it is. And I'm going to just gently tug on this now. It's a little